Why add God to your embryology? We don't need him to explain axonal outgrowth. You're right. I don't remember saying he was an explanation, but that's another conversation. This idea that God is superfluous, let's tackle it sometime. Some of you should take on that assignment. I think I know what the problem is, but let's not pretend that that's a specific problem for theistic evolution. All right, so finally, though, now back to my particular comments. Let's see, you got to do that and that. Let's pretend that I've created some kind of a useful sieve for catching the arguments that have been aimed in the wrong direction, or that are aimed at a bigger target that really don't have anything particular to do with theistic evolution. First of all, guys, if you falsify theism, yes, of course you falsify theistic evolution. We are not saying none of these arguments are relevant in discussing all of the different concepts that are in the vicinity. No, just asking, if you say you got a problem with theistic evolution, let's talk about what you really have a problem with, and we're probably going to find you have a problem with theism or evolution. But there are some things that made it through my sieve, at least a couple. Let me suggest that these are the obvious ones, and they're really the same one. This is the one that was mentioned on the Answers in Genesis web page, suffering and death during evolution. If we just say it that way, if that's all you say, suffering and death during evolution, well, that just sounds to me like a lot of whining about the problem of evil. And I like to whine about it too, and I agree it's a problem for believers. It doesn't have anything specific to do with evolution. A theistic embryologist who thinks the world was created yesterday still has to deal with the problem of evil. So it's not specific to evolution. But that's probably not what the person meant. See, maybe they're saying, well, they don't like God using evolution to create us, using these bad things, suffering, death, selection, etc., to accomplish good ends. Again, I'm not so sure that's a peculiar problem for theistic evolution. I think that word is the word that matters right there. The question is, when did suffering and death occur in this historical narrative? People, as Reformed Christians, but any Christian, we have a narrative of creation, fall, and redemption. That's the problem. You want to aim a missile at theistic evolution that will do damage to it? It doesn't do damage, it just forces everyone to say, yeah, man, that is a problem. I don't know. Will you help me? This is the question we have to understand. In the evolutionary panoply, how does the chronology of creation, fall, and redemption fit? I do think that's a specific question for theistic evolution. I don't think that one is. I am certain that one isn't. I think this takes us to that, and that's when we realize that if theistic evolutions have work to do, and they do, that's where they should be aiming their effort. I haven't decided whether this should be in this 10-minute talk or not, so I'd be interested in comments on that. But that's all I have, and now I want to hear comments and suggestions and questions. And light. All right. Paul.
Steve, I think you've hit a lot of important points, but I'd like to hear your comments on TP.
Theistic.
Theistic psychology. Because especially in those last points, I think that's where people have a lot of rough. And people in natural science have nothing to deal with. Wait till you get to psychology. They have a whole other set of dimensions. So, any response to?
So UTPs are being attacked by I don't know, IDPs or something like that. So first of all, I think I know one of the big problems. If we're going to start talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, souls and souls having causative ability and free will. Is this what we're going to worry about here?
How much do you deal with naturalistic explanation
right.
for depression, or is it because you have biochemical imbalance, or you have a spiritual problem, and so you have naturalistic explanations competing in with other explanations.
It's funny because perhaps what you're getting at is that some version of my TE argument is something you've probably used. That if someone says, well, fill in the blank of the psychiatric disorder we have here, well, that's a spiritual thing. We should really tackle that spiritually. And that the person using my TE sort of reasoning might walk up and say, why didn't you say that about shall we go with swine flu? Let's go with swine flu. Why didn't you say that about swine flu or about, I don't know, hives, headaches? And so there's this odd sort of disconnect between when naturalistic explanation is so natural you don't even think about it. Oh, take an aspirin, or oh, put a Band-Aid on that, versus when it's not even not natural to think that way, but it's considered bizarre or non-Christian to think that way. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't think I can help you.
Come on, Steve. Help us.
That's the tool, but it's going to be harder, right? Because sometimes the target they're aiming at, your answer to even what causes it is we don't have any idea, right? And so you're a little bit more vulnerable than say Darwinian natural selection, which is pretty easy to explain what we're talking about. We're not going to say, well, we don't know, or maybe this, or maybe that. Well, here's the deal: genetic diversity, selection. And you guys have problems where sometimes there's holes, but...
Let me just qualify, too. The issue of purposefulness comes not from the creator there, but also internally.
Yeah.
So people can buy theistic embryology to some extent because, well, that's outside the realm of purposefulness, at least for the cells or when it comes to human behavior, now you have a whole other set of issues.
And you have people bickering about top-down causation and things like that, and yeah, it's Kevin, I guess.
Well, isn't part of the problem, and you didn't mention this, and I guess I would think you might want to throw this into your 10-minute talk. Isn't there a hidden assumption that theism and naturalism are mutually inconsistent? That if some process is naturalistic, that means not God. And that just seems like I wouldn't buy that assumption for a second.
Yeah, I think that, and so this, it must not have been clear, and so that's an important thing for me to understand, is that when we dealt with the very first problem here on this webpage, I'm sorry, it's the second one, God becomes God of the gaps. And I want to hammer on this one. I want to say this is one that's mentioned in the abstract. One objection raised against, don't be distracted by the God of the gaps phrase. What these folks are saying is, well, all those things that are naturalistically explained, well, those are obviously not God, so you're just making God smaller. This tragic irony of this paragraph is these people are preaching the God of the gaps. And they're saying, well, those naturally explain things. Well, you just got rid of God. So, yeah, that's like one of the main points of a 10-minute talk is to say, try that one on theistic embryology, and no one's going to buy it. If they've read Psalm 139, no one is going ever says, I just don't want to read that developmental biology literature anymore because it just keeps impinging on Psalm 139. Have you ever heard anyone say that? And that's the point. Yeah. So I need to make that a lot clearer, and I will. Yeah. Lauren.
You say your last objection hits theistic evolution. But I think it hits old Earth progressive creation or old Earth intelligent design just as strongly. In old Earth intelligent design or old Earth progressive creation, there's just as much.
There is still death. You're
just
right.
Just as much predation and bad mutations and parasites. The only difference is that mutations can't ever accomplish anything more than minor adaptations.
Yeah.
Whereas in theistic evolution, they can also accomplish more. So I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, you're right. My TE is stronger than I thought. Paul.
I suppose this is not a direct concern for Christians, but at least a good point, that Jerry does try and broaden things in a sort of serendipitous fashion. He goes from evolution to science. But he also talks about religion. What he really means, Christian religion is understood in a specific way.
Yeah.
So he's not talking about, for instance, Islam. Not to say there might be complications there as well too, or Taoism, or Shinto, or whatever. And so, he should be really more specific as to his objections.
I mean, criticizing him is shooting fish in a barrel. He is so furious at the NCSG. He says that they should not say that religion is compatible with science. He has made it very clear that it is. He says, well, unless it's deism, well, okay, there we go. So don't, whatever, fish in a barrel.
To answer your question about to include the creation, fall, redemption.